I'm Chef Mike, and today's session is just about an introduction into this powerful piece of the Wolf family of products. We're going to talk about the Wolf Convection Steam Oven. We'll talk about some of the food that came out of it, but really just to get you introduced to this oven and what it can really do. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. There's a moderator on this session that's going to pick up your questions and relay them to me. And if you want to enter some questions in that chat section, go down to that section, and if you don't already have one, it may ask you to create an account. All they need is your email address, but create that account, then you can ask me live questions throughout this session. The goal is to really make you comfortable with all of the elements of this oven so that you can make a great decision if you want to include it in your selection. So let's start with just a very basic review of the geometry inside this oven. I'm standing in front of a Wolf 30-inch professional, that's that larger handle, trimmed convection steam oven. So you'll see as a full 30-inch cavity. It is also available in a 24-inch cavity if that better fits your particular installation. You'll see that it has two fans on the back. That is, they have integrated heat elements in them, and that's where all the dry heat's going to come from. We'll talk about that when we get to that mode. There is a steam generator just behind the back of the oven that pumps the steam into this oven, so you'll see steam entering the oven. It is available either as a plumbed model or as one that you use a front access water tank. This one is a access water tank module, and the tank is here. When this tank is full, and you just want to use regular tap water, when this tank is full, you can get about 2 hours, maybe a little bit more of steam in the 30-inch oven, and you can get closer to 4 hours in that 24-inch smaller oven. Now, if you choose to do the plumb version, and this often applies new construction, sometimes remodel, it's a little tougher to work in a plumb version, because you have to include both a supply line and a drain line. It has a drain right in the center of the bottom, and it will drain out that residual water after you have done a steam operation. Bear in mind, if you're interested in the plumb model, just make sure you have those specs so that you can get your cabinetry well set for both the drain line and the supply line. The 30-inch model also has full extension racks. It has 3 of those and then a solid rack position at the top. In the 24-inch model, your probe, which we'll talk about in a moment, connects on the right-hand side, and in this 30-inch model, it connects on the left-hand side. No big deal, but you just need to know it's on different sides for those models. We're going to talk about the modes. I just want to do one more review of what's in there. So our dry heat's from the convection fans, our moist heat is from the steam generator, and then there's also a broil element on top. Now the broil element has 3 presets, 1, 2, and 3, and that gives you the ability to set a little extra crust on there. So let's talk now about the actual control panel and what some of these modes are. You'll notice that the control panel now is a full touch screen. You're able to scroll to multiple screen levels with all of these on there. And this oven basically has 3 modes of heat. You have dry convective heat from the heat element inside those fan housings. We mentioned that. You have dry heat from the broil element. And then you have the ability to have moist heat either in the form of steam or in a mode that protects the moisture inside. Starting with steam, to engage the steam mode, just press this. You want to make sure that your tank is full, and your screen will come up. It'll remind you that you're doing steam. It'll default to a temperature of 210 degrees. If you want to adjust that temperature, you hit that, and then here it'll give you a quick summary of what this mode is going to do, and you can dial in your adjusted steam temperature if you so desire. Now, what might this oven use steam for? Will it use steam for cooking hard-boiled eggs, grains, all your rice, your quinoa, your farro, your wheat berries? All of that can be done in a steam cavity, open container. So you've kind of removed that little magic ratio you had to have on your stovetop, or the rice would get crunchy or any of that. But steam is harnessed in that way. Now think about the power of steam, because it uses it a couple other ways as well. You never minded putting your hand in a regular oven at 350 degrees as long as you didn't touch the racks. But if you had a tea kettle that's got steam coming out of it that's only at 212, you wouldn't put your hand over that because we get quickly burned. And that's because there's so much more energy in steam. So this allows this really versatile oven to capture all of that versatility and the power of steam and how it uses it in other ways. So we talked about how it does straight steam. Another thing that it does in addition to grains and eggs is blanching. That old process where you had a big pot of salted boiling water on here, you took your green vegetables, you plunged them in there, you pulled them out after a couple of minutes and they stayed bright green, right? That is blanching, but now you just simply put them on the pan, hit steam, and it's between 2 and 4 minutes depending on what the size of that green vegetable is. We've all done a crudité platter where you had the little broccoli and the cauliflower out there. The first hour it looked great, the second hour starting to get a little white, and by the third hour it's really just completely white. That's because it's dehydrating. If you'll take the time just to steam blanch those vegetables, they'll hold their beautiful color, because the magic of steam is it holds color, texture, and nutrients, locks them in. So regardless of how you choose to cook that food the rest of the week, those things are in place. This oven also uses steam in some combination modes, but we'll get to those in a moment as we go through this menu. Next to steam is convection. This is where the oven is going to use dry heat from those convection fans, the embedded heat element that's in those fans, and it's going to move that air with a heat curtain over your food, doing a couple things. One, it will enhance browning. Two, it will save on time because it'll reduce your time a little bit, and it makes it a really efficient oven. And just using convection actually protects moisture as well because it cooks a little bit faster. But if you noticed, when I touched convection on this oven, it gave me 3 options. Straight convection is where I'd be doing almost anything, baking an item or something that you just want the dry heat. Makes this the versatile piece of this. If you've typically stacked this over another oven, it is important that you have the ability to be as flexible with it as you can. So straight convection is just like in your larger oven, smaller space. The next mode down is convection humid. And this is where in your regular oven, we used to cover food that was in a casserole dish. Think about scalloped potatoes or lasagna. For the first part of cooking, you always covered that dish. Why? To protect the moisture. And then the last 10 minutes, you took that covering off, typically foil off, because you wanted the top to get brown and cheesy and bubbly and all of that. However, in this oven, choosing convection humid turns off that recirculation valve that pulls that moisture out. So any moisture that's in your food stays in that cavity. Now, when might that be beneficial? Well, think about things that typically dry out. Certainly chicken and pork tend to dry out very quickly, especially on a convective mode, but it is a great way to set that crust. But also think about things like muffins or quick breads, zucchini, banana, loaves that we make. Convection humid, if you think about the inside of those, they're a lot more moist than a traditional loaf of bread. And that idea of protecting that moisture means you'll end up with this great result without having to think about it too much. Convection humid is a great default mode. You can use it for a lot of things. Just know that you're protecting that moisture when it goes out. So I tell people, if you chose that mode and you made something and it didn't have enough color, but it was perfectly protected, you can always elevate that temperature. In general, when you're cooking with convection, you're dropping the temperature from a Bake 350 recipe by 25 degrees and shortening the time by about 25%. Not always a hard and fast, but that will get you close. Convection steam is another choice under convection. And this is where the oven is going to dose steam into that cavity throughout the entire cooking cycle and cook with dry heat. So convection steam combines these two things together. And you might think, when would I ever use those two things together? The perfect example here is these roasted Brussels sprouts. We've always roasted Brussels sprouts in our regular oven. We toss them a little oil, a little salt and pepper, and we put them in the oven and we roast them. And we get them nice and charred on the outside, but the end centers are sometimes a little dehydrated, sometimes a little dry, and often not bright green. But if you take a look at these, I've got the char that I wanted, but the centers of these Brussels sprouts are perfectly tender. They're not mushy, and they didn't get completely dehydrated, so it's a great choice. Another vegetable that I think really benefits from convection steam is broccoli. We all roast broccoli and cauliflower for that matter. We like it crispy on the edges, but we like that center to be bright green. Using convection steam for those types of vegetables is also a great choice. Now, this oven comes with a nice little guide that will kind of give you a list of foods and what the oven would recommend for cooking them. And in there, you'll also see some bone-in poultry wants you to use convection steam, and some is just convection humid. We roasted this chicken on a gourmet mode. I'll talk a little more about it in a few minutes, but it used convection humid, not convection steam. If I had done a small turkey in here, it would probably recommend convection steam. A little more fat underneath the skin, between the skin and the flesh of the turkey, so it wants to render that out, because the only way to get a brown crispy skin is to get that fat gone, and then the skin will get nice and crispy. So it has to do those two things. So convection humid, protecting the moisture of something that's cooking with dry heat, no water added, and then convection steam, where it's continually dosing the steam into the cavity and cooking with dry heat. It will also use that mode a little bit in combination when you're doing breads in here. But you won't have as much, you'll just need to identify the shape of bread you're making, and then it will take it from there. If I hit one of these modes, just to show you what the next element would be, it would then ask me for temperature and hit start, right? So it's going to do all these things for me. Steam and convection. The last mode that really is just a pure cooking mode is broil. And this is where, if you need to at the very end, let's say I've cooked something with convection steam, got exactly what I wanted, but I'd like a touch more color, I want to set a crust, you can always engage that broiler. I would also tell you that if you have a huge amount to broil, your big oven might be a better choice. If you just think about what can be in this cavity, the broiler is here, it's nice and powerful, but it's not as powerful as your full-size oven. So I'm just thinking about what I'm cooking. If I'm doing a small amount of crostini or cheesy bread or toast, this broiler might be plenty. If I'm doing a whole pan full of ribeyes, I might want to use my other broiler in my bigger oven. So those three, steam, convection, which also includes convection humid and convection steam, and broil, those three categories, steam, convection, and broil, are where the heat sources are in this oven. How the oven chooses to use it is extremely versatile. So let's talk about some of the other modes that are there. Once you get beyond those three, and you're able to realign these any way you want. In other words, if you decided you used one of these more often, you can drag it around within these three screens any place you want. The next two I have on this screen are Gourmet and Gourmet Plus. Gourmet and Gourmet Plus are where you tell the oven what you're cooking, and the oven either makes recommendations or optimizes cooking that. Let's take a look at one of those. Under Gourmet, and I tell people this is a great place for things you don't cook all the time. Scroll through here. There's dishes, there's bakery products, there's dairy products, which are probably going to be like, well, let's look. It's going to be like yogurt. Perfect. Desserts, eggs, fish and seafood, meat, poultry. but I want to use it for something that I don't use it on a regular basis. So if we hit poultry, and it came up with chicken, it's going to ask me then whether I've got breast, legs, halves, or whole chicken. Why does it want to know? What it doesn't ask you is what's the weight. It doesn't need that. It will make the adjustments for that. So this chicken that's roasted over here, I selected whole chicken, and then we hit, it does everything else. Interestingly enough, the mode that it chose, convection humid. Wants it to be, protect the juice that's in that chicken, but it really wants to toast that outside skin too. So it does both of those things, and you don't necessarily have to remember what did the chef say about the mode for chicken. You can just use gourmet as your reminder, and then off you go. I will tell you on that gourmet mode also, it was kind of interesting. It got to the end of its estimated duration, but the probe was still about 15 to 18 degrees less than we had asked it. And the oven just continued. It added time in 4-minute increments and then actually in 2-minute increments until it hit the doneness temperature. So you know that whether this is a 4.5-pound chicken or a 3.5-pound chicken, one might cook faster than the other. The oven's going to take care of you and going to take care of that function so you don't have to be on that. And if you're cooking with the probe, it's this whole concept of cooking to doneness, not by time. We used to always roast our chicken. I knew it at this temperature for 45 minutes. It was perfectly done. That's done. Now I'm going to probe the inside and know exactly when it's the temperature that I want on the inside, providing the juiciest result. And it's going to be perfectly cooked on the outside. So the probe, whether you're in your steam oven or whether you're in one of your other Wolf ovens, is a big advantage. So just make sure you identify what it is you're cooking, and then off you go. And the categories are numerous. I will tell you on the vegetable setting, it's all steamed. So if you're not looking for a steamed vegetable, the gourmet mode is only going to steam them. I like to use convection steam for like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and cauliflower, as we discussed. But note that the modes in here on gourmet are just going to be steam. Gourmet Plus, very similar in its structure to gourmet. The difference is now it's about optimizing. It's going to optimize the mode. It's going to cook with sensors. Now these sensors in this oven are measuring things like how much energy are we putting into the oven in terms of running the heat elements, and what's the moisture content coming off the food, and how quick is the temperature rising. All of those things that we don't need to worry about because the oven is going to optimize it for you. So if you go to Gourmet Plus, you'll see a similar list, although not quite as long. You got appetizers, fresh appetizers, you have braided loaves of bread, you have bread, and you have a gratin, which is like a scalloped potato, can be either vegetable or potato. So it's a few less items, but it's really going to optimize cooking those. It'll identify the mode for you and take care of it. I tell people when you first get your oven, one of the great things you can do is toggle through your gourmet mode and your gourmet plus just to see what's in there, and then you'll remember, oh yeah, I remember seeing something like that. I will use that as a head start on my dish tonight. Beyond that is a function that this oven does so well that it will have you rethinking how you did this in the past, and that is reheat or refresh. Because what it's going to do is it's going to give you a choice of a straight reheat plate of food. You got home from work and your dinner was already on a plate. This oven is going to refresh that food, bring it back, and not end up with the result that you sometimes get in a microwave where things didn't heat evenly or sauces that had cream and fat in them broke into two parts. So if you hit reheat, then it's going to give you a choice. Reheat, reheat crispy, or reheat humid. Okay, so what's going on with that? Perfect example. Grilled cheese sandwich. We don't eat the same time in the showroom. We're eating at all different times. I made some grilled cheese sandwiches for the showroom staff. My showroom manager did not get to her grilled cheese sandwich until it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Food safety had kicked in, so it was in the refrigerator. And you know as well as I do, if you went to your refrigerator and you saw a leftover grilled cheese sandwich, you might just throw it in the trash can and start over. It's not that hard to make a sandwich, right? However, this grilled cheese sandwich, if you put on crispy reheat or reheat crispy, what it was able to do is perfectly melt the cheese again and crisp up the entire outside of the sandwich. It was a perfect choice. So when I'm going to reheat, whether it's just a plate of food with various things on there, I'll just use reheat. If it's things that are more crisp in nature, if you're going to refresh bread, focaccia, or if you're going to refresh fried chicken or fried shrimp or chicken tenders or something that has a crunch element to it, think reheat crispy. The other one, reheat humid, is not like it's going to put a steam bath over it and make it soggy. But if there are not any crisp elements, what it will do is it will use a blanket of steam and dry heat. The difference is it will be a little more efficient if it's not trying to keep textures crisp, it's just trying to reheat them. You will not put your food in a microwave again to refresh it. That being said, the Wolf microwave has a great auto reheat on it, but that's another class. So, reheat, reheat crispy, and reheat humid. Great choices for refreshing last night's meal today, including rice. No judgment. You had Thai takeout food last night and you want to refresh your grain? Reheat humid will bring that back to where you could serve it and never even question whether it was something left over or not. Now, beyond that, we're going into some modes that are pretty specific and dialed into very specific things. So we'll touch on them, but just know there are these other options that are there. The first one is warm, and this is where it turns your convection steam oven into a warming drawer. So you made all these things, or maybe you're entertaining and not everything is ready at the same time, and I need to throw something in an oven. All of your Wolf ovens have the ability to go down to a temperature that allows you to hold them as a warming drawer. But that's where this feature is on this oven. And if I touch the temperature, it's going to tell you exactly what it's going to do. The temperature range is from 140 to 210. Why those numbers? 140 is the floor temperature for holding food at a safe condition. It keeps bacteria from growing at a rapid rate, so it's a great bottom temperature. 200 for me is pretty hot to reheat. However, if it's a casserole or a scalloped potato or lasagna, that's just fine to be that warm. It's just some of those other items. But this is where you can reheat even beef slow enough that you can bring that back. Okay. The next mode is wellness. And the interesting thing here is this almost exclusively uses steam, but it does have some parts that use low heat. The difference is you don't have the ability to decide. You just tell it what you're putting in there, and it will make a recommendation on that. So for the wellness mode, warm towels, hot wraps, perhaps stones, if you're going to do a massage day at home. And then lastly, you can put those beaded, seated cushions in there that refresh, that usually have a little lavender or something to them. All of them that we used to reheat in our microwave can now be done in your steam oven in a most efficient way. And that's all under that category of wellness. Beyond wellness is slow roast. Now this is a mode that I will show you what your options are. I call it my entertaining mode. This is a mode where I can dictate to the oven when I would like to have it done. I know that sounds wild. You can't do every cut in there, but there are certainly some cuts that make sense. If you hit slow roast, the next thing it's going to ask you is, what are you cooking? And you'll see you have choice beef, lamb, other, very interesting, the other, but relax, it's fine, it's nothing crazy. Beef, once you select that, then it's going to ask you what is the cut? What cut of beef are you cooking? Because that's going to give the oven a cue as to how it wants to interface or what modes it might want to turn on. So, beef shoulder, beef tenderloin, beef shoulder, by the way, chuck roast, beef tenderloin, ribeye, sirloin, and rump roast. If you did beef tenderloin, and it says it automatically roasts the food, optimizing to selected desired doneness. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. Now in this, you have the choice of either searing before or after. I tend to sear mine first, and then I place it in the oven, and then I have the ability to set a duration or an end time that I know exactly when my piece will be done. Now your duration is between an hour and 3 hours, and then your end time can be adjusted beyond that. Let's say we're entertaining people at 6:30. I know I'm going to want to have the beef ready to slice and eat at 7, so I can set this up, put it in the oven at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, season it, sear it, probe it, put it in there, tell it I want it ready at 6:50, allowing a 10-minute rest, and I can slice that and serve it at 7 o'clock. It will be perfectly cooked tip to tip. And it does that. You and I both know it doesn't take 3 hours to cook a beef tenderloin. It takes about 45 minutes, depending on how big it is. But the oven will slowly and with very regulated get you to a perfect doneness. And it does that with the probe and allowing sensor cooking and slowing down or speeding up the oven, so at that time, it's perfectly done. The better news is you didn't even have to open the door. For the entire time it was cooking, you didn't even need to do anything other than turn the light on every once in a while and look at it because you were excited to see how it turned out. Complete hands-off operation allows me to focus on the other elements of my meal and not being worried about when that's going to come out, and know that it's going to be perfect from end to end. I have done as many as 3 4-pound beef tenderloins on this roasting pan at the same time. I only got to probe one of them. They were all perfect, tip to tip. They weren't exactly the same size. It did not matter. The oven did a really great job of controlling how the sensors were measuring and what it was telling the oven to do, and it was perfect. Because that mode ends at the temperature, the oven temperature is essentially what the temperature of the food is. You can rest it in the oven. If something goes wrong, dog gets through the window, phone call, somebody scraped their knee, it will hold that. Or your guest called and said, yeah, we were coming, we have a flat tire, we'll be 45 minutes late. You can just hold that at that and just let it hold there, and it'll be perfectly fine to rest in the oven. You get to change things like your actual doneness temperature and that duration. All of that is doable. You can actually do a delay start as well. Okay. Let's scroll up and see what other modes are down here. Cleanse. Now cleanse is a little misleading, but what this mode does is it utilizes steam, and what it'll do is that it gives you a place to either steam sterilize baby bottles or dog chews or any of the equipment that's associated with babies. It just allows you to really quickly get that clean. This mode is also used to prepare and preserve canning. Now, just boiling water canning, right? Big pot, boiling water, that kind, not pressure canning. It won't do pressure canning, but it does do boiling water canning. And you basically put as many jars as you can fit on the pan, and then you put them in there, you hit the button to prepare them. It will steam. It takes about 20 minutes. You can put your rings and seals on the pan above it. It's what I typically put them on a wire rack above my pan where the jars are. Takes about 20 minutes. You need to have your filling hot just like you would the other way. Pull them out, ladle the filling into the jars, lightly set that seal. You don't snug the ring, you just barely put it on there. Put it back in there and hit preserve. Now I know they use the word jam, and here's why. They just want to make sure you understand it's boiling water canning and not pressure canning. So you wouldn't be doing meat this way. But enough vegetables that have enough acid level or whatever you're doing in the traditional canning, you can do in here. Now, in the 24-inch, you could do 12-quart jars. I don't think I'd want to do more than 12, even though I had room for it, because it gets kind of heavy when you're going in there. But 24 pint jars or 12 quart jars, you've knocked the time out in way less time, and you'll be able to do it while the oven is doing things. You can be working on getting your canning filling ready and up to temperature. So very, very easy to do if you want to tiptoe into canning. Next to that is bread and pastry. Now this oven, because it has the ability to add moist heat and dry heat, is the perfect oven for a lot of your breads. I've got a piece here that our executive sous chef put together. It looks like a French boule. And you just simply define what you're cooking in this mode. So I hit bread and pastry, and whether I want to do a flour dusted loaf, which is much like this, just a loaf that doesn't have any other liquid on top. Glazed, in this case, means I've added a water wash or an egg wash, okay, on top, like a braided loaf, challah. And then there's a classic, which is for a loaf of bread. You'll also notice right at the top is the word proof. All of your Wolf ovens, regardless of what they are, will go down to 85 degrees. In fact, they'll give you a range 85 to about 110 that you can allow bread to proof. I don't know about you, but there's no place in my house when I'm baking that's 85 degrees with no air movement. So this whole idea of putting your dough on your counter and let it double in size at the optimum temperature, there's no place to do that. And we all have our little tricks. We put a pan over a burner, or we put it in the sun window, or all of those things. All your Wolf ovens will become a proofing drawer. All you got to do is come here, select proof, and then set the temperature. I think it will default to 90. It goes down to 85 and up to about 110 where yeast starts to die off. This oven's perfect for proofing either the dough as it's set or the form dough, as well as your others. I use the proofing function all the time. Next to that is steam clean. Now this is the first step in a process of cleaning this oven. And I want to open the cavity and just talk for a moment about cleaning this oven. One of the things that makes this oven, it does not have a self-cleaning mode. That's as close as you're going to get, is steam clean. But it's a stainless steel box into which you can introduce steam. If we could put steam in our regular oven, we would be cleaning it that way and not doing a high temperature, burn everything off. But this oven gives you the ability, and you want to steam it for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then I use a non-abrasive or mild abrasive like Barkeeper's Friend or Bon Ami, depending on where you're from. Either one of those, and I scrub all those surfaces. It is helpful when you do that to pull out these side rails, but they have a single thumb screw on the side. That whole rail comes off and gives you access to either side. In your use and care class, when we're taking you through everything, we'll take you through a full clean procedure. But just know it has a button to start that process. The other thing that's helpful in this oven is to know that the door is user removable. You're often mounting this piece over another oven, right? It's on top of something else. Ours is mounted over a steam oven, over a speed oven, but it might be mounted over your single wall oven. And reaching to the back over the door can be challenging. So Wolf made this particular oven has a user removal door. There's a little diagram in the use and care guide, and when you have the use and care class, we'll actually take the door off and show you that. But just know it's going to make it easier to reach that back wall and clean. And then lastly, there are some things on here where we've set a favorite. Know that when you're doing this, you can always hit the heart symbol. If you've got a particular mode that hits it right what you want, you can hit that heart, name it, and you can have that saved as a favorite. Something that makes sense if you've never thought about using this oven to auto defrost. We have a block of beef or a pound of chicken we didn't pull out this morning. I get home. There's other ways to do it, none of them really good, but this, if I go and hit, this is a favorite that's been saved. I take my steam all the way down to about 90 degrees, maybe 100, and steam defrost those food items. They will not get the white ring of death as they start to cook. They're simply going to be thawed. And then you can go on to the next step without having something pre-cooked. There's another mode hanging out on this bottom screen. Now yours may be in a different order because you can drag these wherever you want. And it is the sous vide mode. Now if you're familiar with sous vide, all you need to know is you're doing it in steam, not in the water bath. If you're not familiar with sous vide, think about this is that process where you seal your food in a vacuum sealed bag, removing all the oxygen, you put it in there, and you set the steam to the doneness that you want that item to be. So for beef, let's say you really like your ribeye at 128 degrees. So you can vacuum seal it, cook it to set the steam number to 128. What will happen in the oven is it will continually dose steam at 128 degrees. Now how do you get steam down to 128? If it comes out at 210, fresh air. They introduce enough fresh air and they monitor that temperature, but it's very, very exact. And then the only thing that happens during sous vide mode is the fans on the back wall will rotate slightly. They're not going to add heat. There's no heat element in there for this mode. It's not adding heated air. It just wants to make sure that there's no dead spots of the steam as it circulates around your food. If you're very familiar with sous vide, the timing is just the same as your immersion method. So it is a way. If you decide you're interested in sous vide, please make sure during your use and care session that you get more information. It will also come with some information in the cookbook that comes with this oven to get you started in that process. So, we've talked about this oven and the modes that it has. I've got a couple of examples. We talked about the bread using both a steam and dry heat. The steam is important in the bread because it gives you that chewy texture of French boule and baguette. We talked about hard-boiled eggs, and look how perfect this egg was. Not only did they peel perfectly, but perfectly yellow in the center. No green edges, not overcooked, right? It's one time for a hard-boiled. It's a little bit less for a soft-boiled. You can poach. All that's using steam. We talked about our convection steam roasted Brussels sprouts. Steaming them first, making them tender in the center, and then giving them that extra little bit of char that we really get our flavor from. And then we talked about convection humid. This is where it didn't necessarily add any moisture, but it didn't let any moisture out of the cavity. And that's what we roasted this chicken on. We used gourmet. I just told the oven I was cooking a chicken whole, put a probe in it, and let it go. And it did adjust. I think we mentioned that. It did adjust beyond the 50 minutes to go a little bit longer to get to doneness. Now the probe, we'll go over this a lot. Your probe for your Wolf Convection Steam Oven is one color, it's black. The one for your regular oven is blue, so you can keep them separate. The probe only measures in the last ½ inch, but you want to make sure however you put it in there, you cover all of the metal so nothing is exposed. If you can imagine if it's sitting in food like this, the hotter oven temperature can affect when it thinks it's done. Again, intro the idea to you and we'll totally give you all the information you need once you have your oven in place and can actually start pushing buttons in your use and care session. So that is an intro to the Wolf Convection Steam Oven, one of the most versatile pieces in our entire family of products. And that is for this session. Please, if you had a question, we didn't have any in the moment. If you have one, don't hesitate to reach out to your closest showroom and make sure you get the information you need so that you can make a great decision. To have one of these in your home is a great versatile piece, but we only want you to do that if you're going to use it. Thanks for joining us here in the culinary scene for this virtual introduction to a Wolf Convection Steam Oven. I'm Chef Mike, and I'll see you another time.